Hey, how you doing? Hope you all are doing great. As you've seen in the thumbnail, in this video, we're going to see what if Naruto was Broken Angel. This is part 1, and before getting into video, I request you to check the author of this fanfic and show some love and support. Name of the story is Finding Twin Tails the Pure by Blackheart0009. Do check it. All details in description. And if you want next part of this series, please leave a like, share, and consider subscribe. Let's get into the video. Also check out Patreon for uncensored spicy content. Link in description. Rias waited for Akino to come back from seeing who was knocking at the door of the occult research clubhouse. She was in the middle of talking with her peerage members about different tasks she had for them when she heard a knock at the door. She was surprised at first, as they do not get many visitors before Akino went to see who it was. Her other pieces, Kiba and Kaneko, were waiting quietly while Kaneko ate her chocolate snack. They looked up when Akino walked in holding a brown package. "Who was it, Akino?" Raised asked. Her queen looked up confused. No one was at the door, but this package was sitting there. "I checked it and there was no sign of holy magic, so I'm not sure what it is." Rias frowned at this before she took the package Akino offered. She opened the box and pulled out a book. It was a pure black book with the title reading Twin Tails the Pure in gold writing. She read the title aloud in confusion, not noticing Kaneko glancing at her. She felt a bit concerned with anything that had a title of Twin Tail. Rias looked the book over and saw it had nothing else written on it besides the title. As she was about to open the book, Kiba said, "Bucho, there is a letter." Rias looked down and saw a letter sticking out of the box. She picked it up and opened it. She read aloud, "Dear heir to the Gremory family, I hope you actually open my package, as it will be some insight on the future of not only your peerage but to yourself. It is not a tale of future itself, but a possibility of what could have been. This is when a single powerful soul is introduced into the world and how it changes everything. Please read with your peerage. Both old members and new members I know you shall gain. Try and leave this book in your hands only, for the information, while different, can still lead to drastic changes in which terrible things may happen. I hope you enjoy. With best wishes, Amaterasu." Rias was stunned, and she was not the only one, as her whole peerage was silent. Akino was the first to say anything. Era to think we got a gift from a goddess. So unexpected." Kiba looked up at his king. "So, should we read it?" He was interested in what would happen, and he wondered he would find a clue on how to avenge his friends. "No." Kaneko stated, not wanting anything to do with this. Rias, however, looked at the front of the book. If that this says to be true, then while it might not be the same, it may still help her. This could point out possible peerage members she can add to her own. This could give her a clue on how she can get out of her marriage. This was too good to pass up as she opened the book. The others, though Kaneko was frowning slightly, sat around her as she started. Chapter 1. Rebirth. In an endless sea of colors and shapes, this space of the universe was known as the dimensional gap. A place that was so ever-changing that it was very much like looking through a kaleidoscope, yet the colors were so vivid you knew you were not looking through such a thing. Instead, a person could only marvel at its wonder before dying. The dimensional gap was a place where the void was present, and any life forms without protection would die within seconds of entering this beautiful bridge between worlds. In this world, there was only a single entity that could call this place a home, and at this moment she was calmly sitting down in the nothingness of the gap. She was Ophis, the dragon god of infinity, and she was currently taking the form of a young girl with long black hair. Her skin was as pale as the moon, but her gray eyes had such a cold life to them. Her clothes were black with frills, but did not cover her stomach or chest. She simply wore two X-shaped black markings over her nipples to keep them hidden from the world. Instead of a skirt, shorts, or even pants, this goddess wore none other than simple frilly bloomers to cover her bottom. The group blinked hearing this. They've heard of the dragon god before, but they did not expect her to look like that. While a god, she is able to change her look, so it still stunned them slightly. Kaneko felt a small sense of pride here. Almost every powerful woman she has met all had large figures and big breasts. Even her king had a large bust. To hear someone even more powerful than them be considered to have a tiny figure much like her own was nice. She alone could call this place her true home, but she was currently not alone in this world that she enjoyed. Another being was with her, seemingly frozen in time with how they would not move a single inch. Not a breath could be heard from the one with her. And as she stroked this being's hair, the colors started to fade away to reveal his form. This was a young man with the messiest of blonde hair, and his skin was like the sun had kissed him. He was young, looking to only be 17 years old at most, while also being average height for his age. The most unique trait about him was the 3 whisker marks that were on his face, seeing as they stood out from the rest of his relatively normal features that you would find on handsome young man. He was well built, and his body was seemingly sculpted from the hardest of stone. Ophis ran her finger along the pectoral muscle that was showing through the young man's ripped clothes. "Oh," Aquino said, thinking of such a boy. Rias pictured it, and while there were no pictures, she felt like the boy would no doubt good looking. This was Naruto Uzumaki, the greatest hero that the human race had been able to produce in the last 10,000 years. No others have been able to match him since the day that he had passed from the world of the living, and she had personally collected his soul. Since his passing, she had spent countless hours working to restore what remained of him to his former glory. For it was his final moments that had gained her interest in him. Naruto Uzumaki had been a ninja in his life. He had been a warrior that was trained to kill and die for his village, and he personally had been given a rotten deal in life. Even from a young age, he was weak and defenseless, but he never gave up. He grew and grew to almost impossible levels of power that was without true match to this day. Only the most powerful of angels, devils, and fallen angels could scratch the surface of his true power. Even if somebody did have more power than him, Ophis had little doubt that Naruto would still win any fight. He was a force that did not just rely on fighting, but truly connecting his feelings and understand to other. He could make even the most demented of men switch the side of good, and in battle, he could pull monstrously effective moves out of nowhere. When most people would give up, this human would strive forward and do the impossible. The group was stunned. A human did all of that? He was that powerful. Amazing. Kiba muttered, impressed at someone who was human to have such skill. Aquino thought about it. This soul must be the one that changes everything. The one the goddess mentioned. Rias nodded and wondered if she would be gaining this Naruto as a member of her peerage. This human made an impression on her on the day of his death all those years ago. And because of that, she had decided that she would restore his soul and give this man that had been dealt a bad hand in life a new hand. She was going to allow him to become a new man, or rather, she would let him reincarnate into a happier life. She did have her own reasons for this, but she knew that one day his power may be needed again. This human, whose potential had been underestimated, had never reached his full potential, and if he was to do that, he would no longer need to be human. On top of Naruto's unclothed stomach was an orange object, a jacket. This jacket was neatly folded on it, and the design showing on the back was that of a circle with more circle inside of it. Under that concentrated circle were 9 teardrop-shaped magatama, with the entire design being in black. Each magatama was lined up 3 to a row, into 3 rows like a square. She knew that if she allowed him all his previous power in this new life, then he would grow too arrogant in his nature, or at least he would become a wild card. That was why when she was in the process of restoring his broken soul, she took his greatest power from him and transformed it into an object. This jacket held his godly power that it killed a man that could indeed slay a god. The group was quite hearing this. He killed a man that could kill a god. I'd rather not go up against him, Kiba admitted. But he does not have that power, Aquino pointed out. His power is now that jacket. I guess he will have to find it or something. Rias did not say anything as she read on, wanting to see this Naruto and who he would become. One day, this object would be made known to him, and he would slowly regain what he had lost. He would regain his powers that had made him into the oppressive man to her. This was his sacred gear, amazing tools given to human souls so that they could allow them to do great or terrible things. She wanted this to be his, because once he was reincarnated, his chance of naturally getting a sacred gear were 0. Only part of full humans were allowed these, and the family she picked for him to be reborn into was not human. Kaneko bit her lips slightly. She knew what Naruto would become, if the title has anything to say about it. She hoped the two knew each other, as she sure wished she had someone with her in her darkest days. She wanted him to have something of his old life, but she also wanted him to truly retain the pureness she had come to respect. That was why she would not haunt him with how he once was and the memories of those he lost. As she rebuilt this lost soul, she had been slowly removing the things from his mind that would cause him great sadness. She would lock away the memories of his powers into his sacred gear, and should the day come that he activates it, she would start to watch him once more. As it was, she was using most of her power, keeping the one she hates the most out of the gap. As it was, she would only be able to hold out her strength only so much longer before she was forced to reincarnate him without him waking up first. And should her enemy come into this plane, she would be forced to leave, for she would not have the power to get him out on her own. She felt him stir ever so lightly as he breathed the first breath in his many years of death. This was the breath that she knew would be the one to grant him new life, but yet he showed no signs of waking. Finally, as a sign from above, the orange sun mark on the palm of his right hand started to glow once more with life. Naruto Uzumaki jerked awake once more, but found that he was unable to move of his own free will. The group was on the edge of their seat, waiting for whatever Naruto will do. Where am I? Naruto questioned weakly in his own mind, for he was without much of his memory at this time. The years passing having gotten him to forget much of what even Ophis did not touch. A clean slate given to a hero that was undeserved by the masses. Ophis would only do this for him and only him, and she placed her hand over his heart and got his attention. Uzumaki Naruto, you are in my home. I have decided to grant you new life. I have watched over you for so long now, Uzumaki Naruto. You were a great hero once upon a time, Uzumaki Naruto, but you were not given the life you should have had. Ophis spoke smoothly, not speaking any more than she had to. It is still nice of her. Kiba muttered, still surprised that the dragon god did all of that. Rias frowned, knowing that Ophis also had a plan of her own for Naruto as well. She spoke what was needed to get the point across, and not a single thing more. She felt a shaking hand touch the side of her face before moving to her hair. Such nice hair, as black as night. Naruto spoke the only thing he could think of as he gazed up at her, his hand finding the strength to move for the first time in so long. His eyes went to the sun on his palm, but he found more comfort in looking at this beautiful girl's hair. Ophis looked down at Naruto without showing her emotion, seeing as she made her hair this color because she liked the color black. Rias blinked here. After everything she says and he focuses on her hair, maybe he did not hear her. Akino suggested, getting shrugs. Uzumaki Naruto, this is why you are being given a new life. You are a champion that came before your time. I have seen your soul, and your soul will soon find happiness that you were denied. Ophis spoke once more as snakes made out of the shadows of her powers came from her skin, and despite the texture looking like that of ink, they slowly crawled over Naruto's flesh and sank into his body. The jacket also glowing and sinking into his flesh as well. And right on the inside of the orange sun, glowing on his palm, appeared a second symbol inside the first one. Now that orange sun had a black infinity symbol inside it, the glowing sun and the black infinity. One fit him perfectly, while the other showed that she had a hand in his reincarnation. This was also her blessing to him, but would not become active just yet. Ophis closed her eyes before she felt Naruto start to vanish from her lap. Just as he fully vanished, she felt the barrier she had been keeping up break. The Great Red had invaded her home. Interesting, Rias muttered. I wonder how much will change with Naruto being here. How do you know he will be here? Akino asked. He could be anywhere. A feeling, Rias replied. I think Naruto will be a member of my peerage. The others looked at one another. They all thought the same thing. Will he really become a devil in their group? And what piece will he be? With Naruto. Cousin, look at them. Aren't they beautiful? A young woman wearing a black kimono asked as she held two small babies into her large chest. Her pitch black hair fell down to the middle of her back, and her golden eyes glowed with love for the two newborn babies in her arms. Her pale skin had a hint of red on it from how much happiness she was feeling at seeing the birth of her younger siblings. The two black cat ears on her head were twitching in excitement, while her two tails were moving swiftly behind her in joy. Kaneko stiffened hearing this. That woman sounds a lot like her sister. It could be anyone, any Nekasha, no matter how rare we are. Besides, she said two babies, so it can't be her. But no matter how much she denied it, she had the feeling it was true. Each child in her arms were both beautiful in their own right. The one in her left arm was the older sibling of the two babies. This was on a cute little baby girl, and like herself, she had cat ears coming from her head. Only these ears were white, just like the small tuft of hair on her head. Her eyes were opened and looking around everywhere, showing that they were a golden yellow color like hers were. Her skin was pale like Kuroka's, and her little white tail was moving like no tomorrow. Kaneko was still listening. It sounded like herself as a baby, but until she heard her own name, she will not believe it. The second one, the youngest sibling of the trio, was a little baby boy. Unlike either sister, this boy had naturally tanned skin, like he was born under the sun. 3 small whisker marks stood out on each cheek, giving him the look of a cute little kitten. His tail was wrapped around her forearm, and she saw that there was a small tuft of pure white hair on his head. It was white just like his sister's hair, but instead of a single color for eyes, she noticed that he had 2 colors. Not 2 colors exactly, but she was able to see that 1 second they would turn blue before they went back to a golden yellow. "That's him," Kiba pointed out. "I think we figured that out ourselves," Rias added politely. Kaneko took a deep breath, shocked to hear the hero of great power was a Nekishu like her, and if it was to be believed, her own brother. She tried to deny it, but the feeling was getting stronger now. The mother of these 2 babies was currently laying against the side of a tree, and she wore a blood-stained white kimono. Her skin was beyond pale, and her white hair fell down to her breasts. Her dull yellow eyes peered out from her curtain of hair. Looking at the children she had birthed with a weak smile on her face. She didn't have much strength left in her, and she was bleeding out fast. She knew that she didn't have long to live, but sadly for her, she had not been able to get help fast enough to find a good place to birth her children. Kaneko stiffened hearing this. She never knew her mother as she died, giving birth to her. While she never knew her, she kept the tears from flowing. She still did not want to believe it, but if this was her mother, then she was a Nekishu, which meant that she was a third-class citizen in the underworld. Most of the devils would ignore their cries for help, with very few truly helping them succeed in life. Sadly, they were also a poor family because of how hard it was to find a job in the underworld these days. "Kuroka-chan, what are their names?" Kaneko gasped softly, although Rias did one louder. Rias was stunned hearing that Naruto was the little brother to one of the most dangerous criminals in the underworld. Kaneko, however, focused on hearing her mother's last words. She did not know them at her birth, and she hoped her mother would be proud of her. The mother of the twins asked with a smile, knowing that her eldest daughter would pick out a good name for them. Kuroka got down on the ground and moved her mother's hair out of her face with a sad smile. She knew that she had been born with a weak body. Her mother had always been a rather weak person when it came to physical labor. She had nearly died giving birth to her a while back, so birthing another child, let alone 2, was a death sentence to her. The other members of the group frowned sadly. They felt it was terrible that Naruto and his new family would be without a mother. "This one is going to be Chiron because of her white hair and how cute her little sounds are. I do not know what to name my little brother, though. Why don't you name him Ka-san? As your last act, you should name him." Kuroka offered kindly to the dying woman, knowing that deep in her heart that she wanted to name at least one of the children before she passed on to the afterlife. Kaneko smiled softly, hearing her mother naming her brother. There was no longer denying it, as her little newborn self was named before everyone here. She was grateful no one knew her real name, otherwise things could be uncomfortable for her. The woman moved her head up to look at the little baby boy before she coughed out a glop of blood onto her stomach. She started to go into a coughing fit, and she got her hand up to her mouth near the end. Kuroka watched with small tears in her eyes at how her mother was dying in front of her eyes, but with her happy smile never leaving her face. She watched her mother take her hand away from her mouth, and she looked at the blood in her hand for a moment. She watched as the blood all around her hand began to move towards the middle of her palm, bending and moving along the pale skin until the blood touched in the middle of her palm. Her eyes widened when she saw the perfect name for her youngest child in her blood. She glanced at Kuroka before she used as much strength as she could to move her hand up and show her oldest child what rested on her palm. A single design, something that had come at the perfect moment. The blood she had coughed up had formed the design of a whirlpool on the middle of her hand. Rias went wide-eyed. "Naruto, it means maelstrom, a kind of storm or whirlpool." Akino smiled. Well, at least our hero still has his name. Nah, Naruto. He will be named after the most power, kind of whirlpool, a maelstrom. Tell them that I don't regret giving birth to them. The nameless mother of three said before her head slumped forward and her arms touched the ground with a thump. This woman, who had used her final moment to tell her children that she loved them in her own way, had died in the middle of the forest with a smile on her face. Thus was a mother's love, to give her life for her children at the drop of a hat. She had been proud of herself in her final moments for having lived such a happy life. Having raised her eldest child, having birthed her youngest two, and having named her last. She had died a happy woman. Rias noticed that her rook was now crying quietly. "Kaneko?" she asked, worried. Kaneko rubbed her eyes. "Keep going," she muttered. Rias was still worried when she noticed Kiba and Akino were very sad as well, but none has a bigger reaction than Kaneko. She went back to reading, still keeping an eye on Kaneko. So cold, Grafia-tan. Rias blinked here. She only knew two people that called Grafia, that Serafal and her brother. She did not expect them to be seen so soon. A handsome man with long red hair said as he rubbed the side of his head with his hand. By looks, he seemed to be in his mid-20s, and his skin was fairer than you would usually see in a guy. His bright green eyes showed plenty of kindness in them, and he wore golden armor over his body that gave him an extremely regal appearance to him. He was Surzek's Lucifer, Gremory, and he was one of the four Satans of the underworld. Surzex was currently taking a walk down into one of the cities with his wife and servant Grafia Lucifer. Grafia Lucifer was a high-class woman with silver hair and silver eyes that seemed to take on a more serious outlook on life, which seemed to be there for the purpose of balancing out her husband's stupidity. She was seen wearing a maid's uniform, and she was frowning lightly at her husband. In truth, she really did love him dearly, but in public she had told him many times that his reputation was at stake by treating her with too much affection. Currently, he and she were trying to find something for his younger sister. Her birthday was coming up, and being the siscon that he is, Surzex always tried his very hardest to get his younger sister the most amazing gifts possible. Rias smiled hearing of her brother and his wife/queen. She wasn't all that surprised at her brother's actions, but she tried to guess when this was now. "We are here to find Rias-sama a gift, Surzex-sama. Please remember this reason," Grafia pointed out politely, and she blinked with her husband when they noticed that something small was running towards their direction. Surzex was the one that caught what the small figure was when he noticed a small, white-haired child covered in dirt running towards them with an armful of bread in his arms, and by the tatters his clothes were in, it was easy to tell that he was homeless. Yet his body was very healthy and not underfed like that of the usual homeless children. The boy noticed them, and he seemed too startled for a second before he heard a commotion coming from nearby. "A Nakomata? Well, this is a rare surprise. I thought that none of them were left," Surzex thought with a small smile on his face when he saw the young Nekashu, and a male one at that. Male Nakomata were so rare these days that even in the already rare Nekashu race, they were considered more valuable than 10 castles worth of treasure these days. Kaneko frowned at that. While she knew the rarity of her race, and a male one at that, it did not mean she and her brother can be given a value like that, even if she could be now as a servant to Rias. Any collector of yukai would be having an orgasm just by looking at a fine specimen like this one. Healthy, young, and with a flare of life. They were both surprised when the boy looked behind him in a panic, before he started to use one clawed hand to climb up the wall to a nearby building. Just in time too, because moments later when he was out of sight, a middle-aged man with an average appearance came from around the corner. "Damn it! The brat got away again. This is the 4th time this week. Why don't those beasts ever steal from somebody else? You hear me, you little brat. If you do this again, I will catch you and gut you myself." The man shouted out in frustration at having his merchandise stolen once more by the brat that had just climbed up to the roof of the building. The couple were able to see white hair and white cat's ears sticking up from the edge of the roof, and neither really decided to tell the man that the thief that had stolen his bread was close by. It would seem that the man had given up anyway, because he went back where he came from with an angry grunt. Rias giggled at this. It seems Naruto has made himself a cute, successful little thief. So cute. Grafia was about to call out to the child on the roof, before she felt somebody bump into her from behind and touch her rear end. She and her husband turned around to lecture about how molesting the wife of a Satan was a bad idea, before they both saw a second white-haired child sitting on the ground while rubbing her head. This child was obviously a girl, and besides the pale skin, she looked just like the white-haired boy with the bread. The girl shook her head before she stood up and started to run away before either Grafia or Surzex could say anything to her. She ran behind a corner, and the white-haired boy vanished from the rooftop. Twin Nicomita? Well, this is a lucky day, it would seem. I just know that today I'm going to pick out the best birthday present for Rias Tan, Surzex said with a good amount of excitement, and his wife sighed lightly and prepared to check how much she had in her purse for this perfect gift. Rias blinked here, coming to a conclusion of what her brother might be getting her. She glanced at Kaneko thinking. Kaneko frowned, thinking along the same lines. Did this mean she and her family would be with Rias's family before the other devil took her sister and she killed him? Could this mean her family could be whole and better than it is here? She recalled the title and figured she might have to wait and see. She blinked in shock when she saw that the straps to her purse had been cut completely by something, and the end of her purse where she kept all the money had completely vanished. Rias blinked while Aquino giggled. Era, it seems the strongest queen just got her purse stolen. It's funny when you think about it. Kaneko did not agree since she knew it was her that stole the purse. She feared for her counterpart here. Surzex-sama, it would seem that we have been robbed by a small child. Grafia pointed out with an annoyed, a very annoyed, tone to her voice that spoke volumes for how angry she really was. Kaneko gulped quietly here. Surzex only smiled lightly and looked into the direction that the small children had run off in, because it would seem that they had been robbed by the same people that had been robbing the people of this city for a while now. There had been reports of small robberies happening in this city, but never anything too serious. The most that has never been reported stolen was food and clothing. You know, I may have just found the perfect gift for Rias. Surzex said with complete honesty as he walked in the direction that the children had last been seen by them. Grafia caught on to what he was going on about, and she sighed very lightly but couldn't help but agree with his logic in this. Very well then, Surzex-sama, Grafia said with a light bow, before she followed behind her husband as he took the last known path that the children had used. Kaneko now knew what was going to happen next. She still worried about what could happen, but she hoped for the best. She was still rather ashamed that she had not noticed that her purse had been stolen from her until after she checked for how much money she had. It was a blow to her pride that somebody had stolen from her, and frankly it showed that she was getting lax with her sensing ability if a child had managed to steal something so important from her. With Naruto and Chiron, it had been 5 years since the twin Nekashu had been born, and for the most part life had been fulfilling for them. Naruto and Chiron had each been well raised by their older sister Kuroka, and she had made sure that they would have everything they needed. Everything had been great for them, or at least as great as things can be when you are homeless. Sure, they had to steal for survival, but that was a small matter to the siblings. It wasn't like they were going to be sold things at the regular price anyway, so stealing was their only real option in life. From a young age, Naruto and Chiron were both taught how to steal without getting caught, and using their senses to the limit so that they could avoid being catching them. If they were caught, then Kuroka would come in and knock the devil that caught them out before she robbed them blind, and they all went to safety. At least she teaches and protects them. Kiba pointed out, getting nods from Aquino and Rias. Today was actually a pretty big haul for the trio of siblings as Naruto and Chiron ran towards Kuroka as fast as their little legs could carry them. Lately, Kuroka had been disappearing without telling them about it, and when she came back, she would smell like blood. Naruto and Chiron never thought anything of it, but they were curious to what she did when they stole things. Kaneko stiffened hearing this. What was her sister doing now? Would she do something like it did here? Wani-chan, I have bread Naya. Naruto shouted childishly as he ran up to his giggling sister when she saw that he was having trouble keeping his balance with all the bread he had gotten. She smiled lightly at him, and the youngest of the group beamed when he saw her smile at him. He placed the bread in her lap. I got a purse, Chiron said with a very small blush on her face. To them, money was a lot less important than food. So the winner of today's small contest was obviously Naruto, since he had managed to get enough bread for them to have a decent lunch. Since they didn't even really use money, most of the time they would just use it as a method to help start a fire. Then once they had a fire going, they would only need to gather sticks. It was rather funny that when they got money, they literally threw that money away by burning it. Rias giggled here, unable to stop herself. The others either smiled, giggled, or stared. Guess which one did which? Chiron placed the purse next to Kuroka, and the eldest sister placed both of the twins on her lap with a cat-like grin on her face. Both of you did very well, but it would seem that you still messed up slightly, Naya. Kuroka hinted when she noticed that somebody had entered their territory. Both Naruto and Chiron blinked in confusion when they heard her say that, and looking around childishly, they could see anyone following them. Kuroka frowned when she felt how powerful both of the people that were nearby were, since neither of them would be somebody that she would stand a chance against while protecting two children. She looked at the two children, before she smiled lightly and pressed them against her chest. Then her eyes sharpened, and she struck both of her younger siblings in the back of the neck, knocking them both out before they could even react to her hitting them. She stood up and safely placed her siblings against the tree, before she stood in front of them with sharp eyes that pierced through the darkness of the forest they were in. Kiba frowned. He did not approve of hitting the two like that even if it kept them safe. From the looks of Rias's face, she agreed too. There goes the element of surprise. Her apparent enemy stated as she saw the current Lucifer and his wife come out of the shadows now that they were obviously caught. He had a sheepish expression on his face, while his wife placed the tips of her fingers against her head while shaking her cranium slightly, to show what she thought of her husband, ruining the element of surprise. I didn't sense your power. I smelled you out. Not even you can hide your sense, Satan read Naya. And my sense of smell is too powerful for you to trick Naya. Kuroka said with a frown on her face. Her danger senses not going off yet for some reason. Rias smiled. While her brother was many things, he did not attack randomly or without reason. It was like somewhere in her she didn't register this guy as a threat, or at least that he wasn't going to attack them in cold blood without letting them put up a fight. That, or he liked children and didn't want to kill the one raising the two children behind her. That too, Rias thought, agreeing with Kuroka. It seemed strange she agreed with the criminal, but she figured this was before it happened. Nekashu it is then. I can't sense you at all. Grafia pointed out as she tried to sense for Kuroka's aura, but was surprised when she found nothing. She could feel the aura of the two knocked-out children, but the aura of the one standing in front of them was so well hidden that it was like it wasn't even there at all. They weren't being suppressed either, but it was like they didn't even exist. You noticed me hiding my aura with Sen. No surprise there that the strongest queen would be able to tell that I was a Nekashanaya. That leaves one question, though. Why are you here? Kuroka asked with narrowed eyes, her yellow eyes glowing with power waiting to be unleashed. She could take out the silver-haired devil, but not Surzex. Rias was surprised to hear this. She knew Kuroka is powerful and dangerous, but to think she could defeat Grafia? She did not know if that was true or not, and she did not want to know. A Satan-level opponent would be far too much for her to fight at this moment in time, but an ultimate-class devil was just in her range of ability. One good hit was all she would need. If she would get that hit remained to be seen. Now, don't be so hostile. We don't want any trouble, but we do need to get our money back. Surzex said with a silent wish that nothing got started over this. He didn't want to get the little kids to get hurt in the conflict, so he would try and play the mediator. He could already tell that Kuroka's and Grafia's opposite personalities would create friction between them. In the last few years, it had been confirmed that Kuroka had been killing dozens of devils around the area for some unknown reason. He guessed he got his answer from how she was defending the two smaller children behind her. Kaneko blinked here. Her sister was killing devils to protect them? She did not know how she felt about that. She wondered if her sister felt the same and would have protected her. She did not know, nor did she think she could handle the answer. Take your money and leave, Naya, Kuroka said as she kicked the purse over to them. She had no use for the money anyway other than for starting a fire. Grafia caught her purse before she looked to see if it could be fixed. She sighed in relief when she realized that her purse would have to be repaired, but it was fixable. Kuroka's eyes narrowed when she saw that neither of the devils were moving from their spots, and they didn't look like they were about to leave either. Thank you for returning that money, but our business isn't finished yet. You see, we couldn't help but notice that these two had to steal to live. I will be honest with you when I ask you if this is the kind of life you want them to live. Surzex pointed out with a small wave towards Naruto and Chiron. Kuroka charged at Surzex with rage in her eyes, before she jumped back when she noticed that he was leaking out his family ability. The black and red power of destruction that originally came from the Bale family, but was later obtained when Lord Gremory married a woman from the Bale family. Such a power was just as deadly at her senjutsu. Both were pretty much one-hit kills to most opponents that didn't have experience fighting against it or very high resistances. She was not ready to fight something like this. Not without a plan for it, that is. Rias was on the edge of her seat, as was Kaneko. Both were worried, but both for slightly different reasons. There is no other way to live for us. Devils like you have it easy. You were born with a high status, and society looked to you as the future Naya. We are considered to be the lowest part of low, and have to do anything we can to get up in the world Naya. Yet, we are still happy. You have nothing that you can do to help us, Kuroka said firmly, knowing that she wouldn't be able to go with this person. Rias was quite here while the others looked down. They knew how they would have been treated and such without Rias, and how she made their lives better. Rias knew she was born into a better life, but to hear it so bluntly was not something she heard at all. Her mother wanted her to protect them. It was part of her dying wish, so of course, she was going to do everything in her power to make sure that they stayed as safe as possible. She was tempted, but she knew this could be a trap to take her out without her putting up a fight in the moment of surprise. I may not know what it means to work my way up from the bottom, but I do know that being raised as thieves will come to hurt those two in the end. They are innocent kids that have a hard life, and I want them to escape from that kind of life. You are no doubt a good sister to them, and I am not asking you to give them to me. That is why I have an offer for you. Surzek stated with a stern appearance that seemed to be a rare thing on his face when in private company. He didn't want kids to be punished because of how they were raised, and if he was honest with himself, he had some selfish reasons for this as well. Nekashu were the most powerful breed of Nikomata. And while Nikomata had the potential for Senjutsu and Yujitsu, the Nekashu had the potential to completely master Yujitsu and Senjutsu. The Nekashu were a high-level Yukai species, and even in his long life, these three were the only ones that he had ever seen. They were just that rare, and they were a mostly female race. Finding a male Nekashu was something that he couldn't simply pass up. If a normal female Nekashu was worth 10 castles worth of treasure, then the male of the species was easily 10 times that much. Kaneko frowned again, hearing this even if it would be true. Senjutsu masters had the potential to also harness their own Tuki, and with that Tuki they could enhance their speed, strength, and durability to amazing levels. The fact that they were also able to naturally use chakra, an energy that had a small amount of light properties, made them dangerous to devils. Not to mention that in theory a Nekashu that was turned into a Nekashu/devil hybrid would be able to have a high resistance to light-based abilities. An offer Naya? Kuroka asked in surprise. This was something she hadn't seen coming. Grafia was looking at her beloved with an expression of confusion as well. She had only been aware of him, wanting to get their money back. Rias was now smiling, thinking of having new friends and new powerful pieces. She then paused and glanced at a frowning Kaneko. She knew what she was before she became her rook. She did not know much about Kaneko's past, even her own name, before she helped the girl and gave her a new name as a sign of friendship. Could this be? Yes. If you agree to these conditions, then I promise that you and your family will be able to live a life of relative comfort. You won't have to worry about being attacked randomly, and you shall have a bed to sleep in each night. Surzek tempted lightly, while the idea started to tempt Kuroka even further. This was starting to sound too good to be true. As far as she knew, no devil was kind enough to offer others something without something in return. Somebody from the Gremory family should be no different, no matter how nice the family was rumored to be. They were devils after all. Ria's pouts here slightly muffled. While she could understand Kuroka's worry and point, she felt her family pride being challenged. Even if she was biased. What is the catch, Naya? Kuroka asked with her arms crossed under her impressive rack, and Surzek nodded slightly at how she wasn't falling for how tempting he was trying to make the offer seem. Simple. You will work under the Gremory family as our personal spy. You will be sent out on missions when we ask, and you will be expected to remain a mystery. That means that if you are caught, the Gremory will deny every having anything to do with you. My family will cut all ties with you. The second thing is that I would like for your siblings to become a part of my Ria Stan's peerage when she gets her evil piece set. Surzek stated with a small smile on his face. Getting Ria's two potentially amazing pieces would be an amazing gift for her birthday. Not to mention the fact that the family wouldn't have to steal anymore, unless Kuroka was ordered to do that. The two children would get a friend that was only 2 years older than them, and Rias would get two rare friends/servants/pets depending on how she saw them. Kaneko looked up at Rias, who was smiling kindly at her. Kiba looked between them, trying to understand why, while Akino was focused on the book. Kuroko was torn between choosing her own desire for a free life or the safety and happiness of her younger siblings. She could trade away all of their freedom for a happy life that wouldn't be completely filled with danger, or she could tell Surzex to stick his offer up his ass and potentially damn them all in the future. They were Nekashu, a near-extinct species of Nikomata. They were most likely the last of their kind, and if they died out, then that was it for their race. Not to mention, if something happened to her, then nobody would be there for her precious siblings. It was a gamble. She could do this and make sure her family was safe, or toss the offer away and throw away this chance of safety. The choice was obvious, but she just didn't want to make it. She had sworn on her mother's unmarked grave that she would protect her siblings, no matter the cost to herself. She said unmarked, because if anyone discovered that the grave held a Nekashu in it, they would break it. It was easier to have the location memorized than to rebuild it every time they went